The wind carried whispers across Vintém Hill that August evening in 1966, as if the very earth remembered what had transpired on its slopes. Miguel José Viana and Manuel Pereira de Cruz lay motionless among the tall grass, their bodies positioned with unnatural precision, faces hidden beneath crude lead masks that gleamed dully in the fading light. To the authorities who found them, it appeared to be a case of misguided amateur science. Two men perhaps killed by radiation or toxic gases in some botched experiment. But the truth was far more sinister. The seekers of hidden knowledge. Miguel and Manoel were not scientists. They were occultists, members of a clandestine group that met in the shadows of Niterói's old quarter, poring over forbidden texts and practicing rituals that predated the arrival of Portuguese colonizers. For months, they had been obsessed with one particular entity from Tupi-Guarani folklore, the Anhangá. Most knew the Anhangá as a benevolent guardian spirit of the forest, a shapeshifter that appeared as a white deer with burning red eyes to protect indigenous peoples from harm. But Miguel and Manoel had uncovered darker interpretations in texts that scholars refused to acknowledge. Accounts that spoke of the Anhangá as a parasitic deceiver, a demonic trickster that fed on human souls while promising cosmic enlightenment. The two men had spent weeks deciphering a leather-bound notebook filled with cryptic instructions. The pages contained not scientific formulas, but ritual chants written in a mixture of Portuguese, Tupi phrases, and symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Between the incantations were precise coordinates, astronomical calculations, and disturbing directives. Be at the determined place at the determined hour when the sky weeps fire. Protect your eyes from the burning gaze that drives mortals to madness. Await the signal. 3 flashes of light that are not lightning. Speak the names of the hungry earth in the old tongue. The preparation. On the afternoon of August 20th, Miguel and Manoel traveled to Vintém Hill carrying a peculiar assortment of items. Hidden in their canvas bags were crystals carved with angular symbols, copper rods twisted into spiral configurations, and the lead masks they had crafted in secret. The masks were not protection against radiation. They were shields against the Anhangá's hypnotic gaze, which legends claimed could burn away sanity with a single glance. As storm clouds gathered overhead, the two men climbed to the hill's summit. They chose their location carefully, an area where magnetic readings fluctuated wildly and compasses spun without direction. Local indigenous elders had once warned that this ground was cursed, a thin place where the spirit world pressed close to the mortal realm. The men arranged their crystals in a complex pattern, drove the copper rods deep into the earth, and donned their lead masks as the first raindrops began to fall. Through the narrow eye slits, they could see lightning beginning to fork across the darkening sky. The summoning, at precisely 6:30 p.m., as recorded in their notebook, Miguel began reciting the incantations. The words felt wrong in his mouth. Ancient syllables that seemed to vibrate in frequencies human vocal cords were never meant to produce. Manoel held the copper rods steady as electrical energy from the storm began to flow through them, creating an otherworldly humming that made their teeth ache. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the air itself began to change. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. The storm clouds above them started to rotate in an unnatural spiral, and the crystals began to emit a sickly green phosphorescence. The copper rods grew hot enough to burn flesh, but both men held their positions, convinced they were on the verge of making contact with advanced extraterrestrial beings. They were horribly wrong. The Anhangá awakens. 3 flashes of light split the sky. Not lightning, but something far more alien. Between the illuminations, a form began to materialize in the center of their ritual circle. At first, it appeared as the legends described, a magnificent white deer with antlers that gleamed like polished bone. But as the entity stabilized, its true nature became horrifyingly apparent. The Anhangá was a thing of contradictions and impossibilities. Its body shifted constantly between deer and human, antlers melting into gnarled fingers before reforming as twisted horns. Its eyes were not simply red. They were portals to some burning dimension, twin furnaces that contained the anguished faces of previous victims. When it opened what might have been a mouth, voices poured out, dozens of them, speaking in the tongues of the dead. "You called us? Seekers of knowledge. The voices whispered in unison, some speaking Portuguese, others in languages that had been extinct for centuries. You wish to know the secrets beyond the veil. We are here to grant your desire. Miguel and Manoel found themselves unable to move. The lead masks that were supposed to protect them felt suddenly fragile, like paper barriers against an inferno. Through the eye slits, they watched in terror as the Anhangá approached, its form becoming more grotesque with each step. Tentacles of shadow writhed from its body, reaching toward them with hungry intent. Knowledge has a price. The entity hissed, and now its voice was their own. Miguel heard his words coming from the creature's throat, while Manoel listened to his childhood memories being recited in that horrible chorus. Your consciousness, your memories, your very essence, all will become part of us. In return, you will know everything, for the brief moment before you know nothing at all. The feeding. The Anhangá did not kill them quickly. First, it fed on their memories, draining decades of experience in minutes. Miguel felt his first kiss, his mother's lullabies, the taste of his favorite meal all being consumed and integrated into the entity's vast psychic appetite. Manoel watched his dreams being devoured one by one, leaving empty spaces in his consciousness that filled with the screams of the thing before him. As their life force weakened, the men could no longer maintain their grip on the copper rods. The crystal's light began to fade, and the portal that had allowed the Anhangá to manifest grew unstable. But the entity had gotten what it came for: 2 more souls to add to its collection, 2 more voices to speak through its impossible mouth. When their hearts finally stopped beating, Miguel and Manoel collapsed where they stood. The Anhangá regarded their bodies with something that might have been satisfaction before dissolving back into the storm clouds, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and corruption. The discovery. 2 days later, a group of boys flying kites discovered the bodies. The police found no obvious cause of death. No wounds, no signs of poisoning, no evidence of violence. The lead masks were dismissed as crude protective gear, the copper rods as makeshift lightning rods. The crystals had lost their phosphorescence and appeared to be ordinary quartz formations. The notebook was confiscated as evidence, but the investigating officers found it largely incomprehensible. Most assumed it contained scientific calculations gone wrong. The few who attempted serious translation reported headaches, nightmares, and a persistent feeling of being watched. Eventually, the notebook disappeared from the evidence locker under mysterious circumstances. The legacy. In the decades that followed, Vintém Hill gained a reputation for unexplained phenomena. Hikers reported seeing strange lights dancing among the trees during thunderstorms. Others claimed to hear voices speaking in unknown languages when the wind was right. Electronic equipment malfunctioned in certain areas of the hill, and more than one visitor fled after glimpsing a white figure moving through the undergrowth, always just at the edge of vision, always watching. Local indigenous communities were not surprised. They had always known that some places were better left undisturbed, that certain entities should never be summoned. The elders spoke in whispers of the Anhangá's true nature, not as a protector, but as a patient predator that waited in the spaces between worlds for curious minds to open doorways they could not close. The warning. Today, Vintém Hill remains a magnet for occultists, UFO enthusiasts, and thrill seekers drawn by the mystery of the lead masks case. They come with EMF detectors and digital recorders, with crystals and copper implements, convinced they can succeed where Miguel and Manoel failed. Some carry photocopies of pages from the lost notebook, reconstructed from police reports and witness testimony. They never consider that the Anhangá might still be there, still hungry, still patient. The entity learned from its encounter with Miguel and Manoel. It understands now how to present itself as benevolent, how to whisper promises of enlightenment and cosmic truth. It knows that humans will always be drawn to forbidden knowledge, always convinced that they can control forces beyond their comprehension. On stormy nights, when the electromagnetic conditions are right and the barrier between worlds grows thin, sensitive individuals report feeling a presence on Vintém Hill. Something watches from the tall grass, something that appears as a white deer in peripheral vision but reveals its true nature to those foolish enough to look directly. The Anhangá waits still, no longer confined to indigenous folklore but adapted to modern myths of aliens and government conspiracies. It has learned to speak through radio static and digital noise, to leave traces that satisfy skeptics while hiding its supernatural hunger. Every attempt to solve the mystery of the lead mask's case only feeds its power. Every ritual performed in imitation of Miguel and Manoel's final act only draws it closer to our world. The notebook may be lost, but its contents live on in fragments. Photocopied pages, transcribed passages, and half-remembered chants that circulate through online forums and occult gatherings. Each time someone attempts to decode its secrets, each time the ritual is reconstructed and performed, the Anhangá grows stronger. For it was never about the specific words or precise coordinates. The ritual was simply bait, a lure designed by an ancient intelligence that understood human nature better than humans understood themselves. The real summoning begins the moment someone becomes obsessed with forbidden knowledge, the moment curiosity transforms into compulsion. The lead mask's case was never solved because it was never meant to be solved. It was meant to continue to spread, to draw new victims to Vintém Hill generation after generation. And somewhere in the tall grass, patient as stone but hungry as flame, the Anhangá waits for the next seekers to arrive.